Jake Morrison pushed his cleaning cart through the empty corridors of Gateway Station at 3 in the morning. The diplomatic hub was finally quiet after another crazy day of alien ambassadors arguing about trade routes and territory disputes. This was his favorite time to work. No crowds. No important people looking through him like he was invisible. Just him, his mop, and the hum of the station's life support systems. He'd been working this job for 2 years now. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid decent and came with quarters on the station. Most people back on Earth would kill for a chance to live in space, even if it meant scrubbing floors. Jake didn't mind the work. It gave him time to think, to listen to music, to be left alone. Tonight he was cleaning Sector 7, the maintenance level that most station personnel forgot existed. This was where the important stuff happened, the guts of the station. Waste processors, power conduits, water recycling systems. The stuff that kept everyone alive but nobody wanted to see. He was emptying a trash unit near the old processor when he heard it. A tiny sound, almost like a kitten whimpering. Jake stopped, pulling out one A-bud. There it was again. Coming from behind the big waste container in the corner. He approached slowly, not sure what to expect. Maybe some kind of space rat? Did space stations have rats? He'd heard stories but never seen one himself. What he found instead made him freeze in place. A small creature huddled behind the container, pressed against the cold metal wall. At first glance it looked like some kind of lizard, but the scales caught the dim light in a way that seemed almost metallic. It had 4 legs, a long tail wrapped around itself, and wings folded tight against its body. Its eyes were the color of old gold, watching him with an intelligence that made Jake's skin prickle. This wasn't some pest. This was something important. Something dangerous. The creature trembled, making itself as small as possible. Its scales were dull gray, almost colorless, and Jake could see its ribs through the thin skin. It looked half-starved and completely terrified. "Oh man," Jake whispered. "What are you?" The creature flinched at his voice but didn't run. Maybe it was too weak. Those golden eyes just stared at him, unblinking. Jake had seen a lot of aliens working on Gateway Station. The Treen with their 6 arms. The Corvin who looked like walking trees. The Zentarii with their crystalline skin. But he'd never seen anything like this up close, though something about it tickled his memory. Something from the orientation videos they'd shown him when he first got the job. Dragons. The word came to him suddenly. The orientation officer had mentioned them briefly. Ancient species. Incredibly powerful. Rarely seen. Definitely not the kind of thing you found hiding behind a trash can looking scared and starving. "Please," the creature whispered. Jake jumped. It could talk. "Please," it said again, the word coming out rough, like someone learning a new language. "Need hide. Need sleep. They kill me. Please." The voice was small and desperate. Female, Jake thought, though he wasn't sure how he knew that. Every regulation Jake had ever been taught screamed at him to call security immediately. Unknown alien on the station. Potentially dangerous. Could be carrying diseases. Could be a security threat. He should hit the panic button on his comm unit and let the professionals handle it. But she'd said please. And those eyes held something Jake recognized from his own childhood, from his own time in the system before his foster family took him in. Fear. Loneliness. The desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would actually help instead of hurt. "Who's trying to kill you?" Jake asked, kneeling down slowly so he wouldn't seem threatening. "Clutch brothers. Clutch sisters. I run. I hide. Too weak to fight. They find me, they kill. Dragon way. Strong live. Weak die." Jake's stomach turned. That's messed up. Is law. Is tradition. I am defective. I flee. She looked down, shame in her voice. "I ask lowly mammal for help. Desperate. Lowly mammal. Great." Even the scared, starving refugee had species prejudice. But Jake had dealt with worse. He'd been called worse by people who were supposed to protect him. He looked at the dragon hatchling. She couldn't have weighed more than 20 pounds. Her wings looked paper-thin. She was shaking, either from cold or fear or both. Every rational part of his brain told him to walk away. But Jake Morrison had never been particularly rational, especially when someone needed help. "All right," he said, making a decision that would probably get him fired. "Come here." He unzipped his maintenance jacket and held it open. The hatchling stared at him, confused. "Come on. I'll hide you. But we gotta move fast before the next security patrol." She hesitated for a long moment, clearly weighing whether to trust him. Then slowly, painfully, she crawled forward. Jake scooped her up, surprised by how light she was, and tucked her inside his jacket. She was warm, almost hot, but not uncomfortably so. "Stay quiet," he whispered. He zipped up the jacket and grabbed his cleaning cart, forcing himself to walk normally toward the service elevators. His heart hammered. If anyone stopped him, he was done. But the corridors stayed empty. 5 agonizing minutes later, he was in his quarters. The door slid shut behind him and he let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. His room was tiny. A bed, a small desk, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it was private and it was warm. Jake set down the hatchling on his bed and she immediately collapsed, exhausted. He grabbed his dinner from the small cooler. Synthetic chicken and rice. Not great, but it was food. He offered it to her and she ate desperately, not even chewing properly. "Slow down," Jake said gently. "You'll make yourself sick." When she finished, he went to his closet and pulled out every towel he owned. He piled them in the corner near the heat vent and turned the temperature up. The hatchling watched him, those golden eyes following his every movement. "There," Jake said. "It's not much, but it's warm." She crawled into the nest of towels and curled up, her tail wrapping around herself. For the first time since he'd found her, she looked almost peaceful. "Thank you," she whispered. "What is your designation?" "Jake. Jake Morrison. What's yours?" She was quiet for a moment. "Dragons do not name hatchlings. Not until they prove strong. Not until they survive." That made Jake angry in a way he couldn't quite explain. "Well, you need a name. How about Ember? You kind of glow in the dark." "Ember," she repeated slowly, testing the word. "Yes. Ember is good." Her eyes were already closing. "Get some sleep," Jake said softly. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." "Jake Morrison," she murmured, half asleep already. "Why you help? I am nothing. You are nothing. Why?" Jake thought about that. About all the people who'd helped him when he was nothing. When he was just another scared kid in the system. "Because you asked," he said simply. "And because everyone deserves a place to sleep." Ember's breathing deepened into sleep. Jake sat at his desk, staring at the dragon hatchling in his room, and wondered what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. Outside his window, the stars turned slowly. And somewhere out there, something was hunting. 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and constant anxiety. Jake kept Ember hidden in his quarters, sneaking her extra food from the cafeteria and making excuses about why he suddenly needed double rations. He told the food service workers he'd started working out. They didn't question it. Ember grew fast. Scary fast. Within the first week, she doubled in size. Her scales began shifting from dull gray to a warm copper color with hints of gold when the light hit them right. She was beautiful in a way that made Jake nervous. Beautiful things on Gateway Station attracted attention, and attention was the last thing they needed. The hardest part was leaving her alone during his shifts. He'd come back to find her pacing his tiny quarters like a caged animal, her tail knocking over everything that wasn't bolted down. She was getting stronger, more energetic, and his room was definitely not big enough for a growing dragon. "Tell me more about Earth," Ember said one night while Jake ate his dinner. She'd already devoured hers in about 30 seconds flat. Jake swallowed his synthetic meatloaf. "What do you want to know?" "You said before, about places for young ones who have no parents. Orphan houses?" "Orphanages, yeah. I spent some time in one when I was a kid. After my parents died in a shuttle accident." Ember tilted her head, a gesture Jake had learned meant she was confused. "But you survived. You lived to adulthood. How?" "Well, the state took care of me. Made sure I had food, clothes, a place to sleep. Eventually a family fostered me. The Johnsons. They weren't perfect, but they treated me like I mattered." "This is not logical," Ember said, her tail swishing back and forth. "You were weak. Young. You could not hunt or fight. Why waste resources on you?" Jake set down his fork. They'd had versions of this conversation before, but each time Ember seemed genuinely baffled by human behavior. "Because that's what people do," Jake explained. "We take care of each other. The strong protect the weak. Parents protect kids. Communities protect families. That's how we survived long enough to get into space in the first place. Dragons do not do this. Hatchlings fight from first breath. Strongest eat first. Weakest starve. Strongest take best sleeping places. Weakest freeze. This makes dragons powerful." "Does it though?" Jake challenged. Because you're the first dragon I've ever actually met. I've been on this station for 2 years and I've seen maybe 3 dragons pass through, total. Meanwhile, there's like 200 humans here at any given time. Ember went quiet, processing this. She did that a lot, got very still while her mind worked through ideas that didn't fit her worldview. Humans are numerous, she finally said. But individually weak. One human could not defeat one dragon. Maybe not in a straight fight. But humans don't fight straight. We fight smart. We work together. 100 humans together could probably take down a dragon, if they had to. This clearly disturbed Ember. Her scales rippled, a sign Jake had learned meant she was uncomfortable. I do not understand your species, she admitted. But I am grateful. You could have left me to die. You gained nothing from helping me. I gained a friend, Jake said simply. Friend? Ember repeated the word slowly. We do not have this word in dragon tongue. What does it mean? Jake thought about how to explain friendship to someone who'd never experienced it. It means someone who cares about you. Someone who helps you not because they have to, but because they want to. Someone you can trust. Trust. Another strange concept. Dragons do not trust. Trust makes you vulnerable. Yeah, it does, Jake agreed. But it also makes you stronger. It's like, I trust you not to eat me in my sleep, right? Ember's eyes widened. I would never. You saved me. You feed me. You provide shelter. To harm you would be. She struggled for the word, wrong. Very wrong. Exactly. That's trust. And because we trust each other, we're both better off. I don't have to sleep with one eye open, and you don't have to worry about where your next meal comes from. Ember settled down onto her nest of towels, which Jake had to replace almost daily now because she kept scorching them. Apparently dragons gave off heat when they slept. Your species is very strange, Jake Morrison, she said. But perhaps strange is not bad. I learn much from you. Language improves. Understanding improves. I know now what kindness means. What compassion means. Dragons have no words for these things. Maybe that's why you guys are always alone, Jake suggested carefully. Hard to build anything when everyone's trying to kill each other. Over the following days, Ember became more than just a refugee Jake was hiding. They developed routines. He'd wake up and find her already awake, practicing the standard language by reading his old books on his datapad. She was brilliant, picking up concepts faster than seemed possible. She told him stories about dragon culture that made his blood run cold. Hatchlings emerged from eggs already fighting. The strongest would sometimes kill their siblings within hours of hatching. Parents watched and did nothing. It was tradition. It was law. Weakness could not be tolerated because weakness meant death in the harsh territories dragons claimed. But what about when you're hurt? Jake asked. What if you break a wing or get sick? Then you die, Ember said matter-of-factly. If you cannot hunt, you starve. If you cannot fight, you are killed. Only the strongest deserve to live. That's insane. What a waste. Waste? Ember looked confused again. Yeah. Like, what if the dragon who died would have been an amazing artist? Or scientist? Or teacher? You can't know someone's value just by how well they fight. This concept seemed to shake something loose in Ember's understanding. She got that very still look again. I never thought, she said quietly, that my clutch brothers or clutch sisters could have been more different. I only thought they would kill me or I would kill them. That's really sad, Jake said honestly. Yes, Ember agreed, and something in her voice made Jake's chest hurt. It is very sad. I think I am beginning to understand why you cry, Jake Morrison. Why humans leak water from eyes when they feel pain that is not physical. Jake hadn't realized she'd noticed the one night he'd broken down, overwhelmed by the stress of hiding her and the memories of his own childhood. But before he could respond, his comm unit beeped. A message from station security. Chief Brennan wanted to see all service personnel tomorrow for a routine interview about recent irregularities. Jake's blood went cold. What is wrong? Ember asked, sensing his fear. They're investigating. The missing food, the power usage, probably the heat signatures from my room. They know something's up. Ember stood, her wings partially unfurling. She looked bigger now, more formidable. I will leave. I will not let them punish you for helping me. No, Jake said firmly. We'll figure something out. I'm not letting them send you back to die. But why? Ember's voice cracked. Why do you risk everything for me? I am dragon. You are human. We are enemies in the old ways. Natural competitors. Why? Jake met her golden eyes steadily. Because you asked for help. And because nobody should have to fight their whole family just to survive. That's not strength. That's just cruel. Jake never made it to the interview with Chief Brennan. The dragons arrived first. He was finishing his morning shift, exhausted from another sleepless night worrying about Discovery, when the station-wide alert blared through every speaker. All personnel were ordered to the main concourse immediately. No exceptions. The tone in the security officer's voice made it clear this wasn't a drill. Jake's heart dropped into his stomach. He abandoned his cleaning cart and ran toward his quarters, but armed security blocked the service corridors. They were herding everyone toward the concourse whether they liked it or not. The main concourse was packed. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species crowded together, confused and nervous. Jake pushed through the crowd, trying to get a better view of what was happening. That's when he saw them. 5 dragons stood at the center of the concourse, and they were nothing like Ember. These were juveniles, maybe a year or two older, and they were magnificent in a terrifying way. Each stood nearly 12 feet tall, covered in scales that gleamed like polished metal. Red, black, silver, green. Their wings stretched wide enough to cast shadows over dozens of spectators. Claws scraped against the deck plating, leaving marks in the reinforced steel. The largest one, covered in black scales with red highlights, stepped forward. His eyes swept over the crowd with obvious contempt. Jake felt physically ill just looking at him. "I am Razor," the dragon announced, his voice booming through the concourse without need of amplification. "We seek a fugitive from Dragon Justice. A defective hatchling. Female. Copper-scaled. She carries our clutch signature and was detected on this station 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. Exactly when Jake had found Ember. "The hatchling violated sacred law," Razor continued. "She fled combat. She refused to prove her worth. She is weak and therefore must be eliminated. This is our way. This is Dragon Justice." Station Director Hayes stepped forward, a nervous-looking older woman who Jake had only seen a handful of times. "With all respect, the Galactic Concordance has strict policies about." "Dragon law supersedes your policies," Razor interrupted, his tone making it clear this wasn't a negotiation. "We have treaty rights. We have sovereignty over our own kind. You will surrender the defective or face consequences." Jake's mind raced. They were talking about Ember. About killing her. And from the way Director Hayes' face had gone pale, it seemed like the station was going to comply. He couldn't let that happen. Before his brain could tell his mouth to shut up, Jake was pushing through the crowd. "No." The word came out louder than he intended. Hundreds of heads turned. Including 5 very large, very dangerous dragons. "Who speaks?" Razor demanded, his golden eyes scanning the crowd. Jake raised his hand, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might explode. "Me. I'm speaking. And the answer is no. You can't have her." The crowd parted around Jake like he had a disease. Nobody wanted to be near the idiot human challenging dragons. Razor's eyes locked onto him, and Jake felt the weight of that stare like a physical thing. "You know where the defective is, little mammal?" "She's not defective," Jake said, his voice shaking but holding steady. "Her name is Ember. And she's under my protection." The crowd erupted in whispers. Director Hayes looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Razor's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth the size of Jake's fingers. "Your protection," Razor repeated slowly. "You. A janitor. A worker-caste mammal with no claws, no fangs, no armor. You believe you can protect her from us. I believe you have no right to kill someone just because they don't want to fight their own family," Jake shot back. "That's not justice. That's murder." Another dragon, this one with silver scales, laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Mammals and their soft words. You do not understand. The weak must be culled. It is nature. It is law. One weak dragon spreads weakness to the clutch." "That's insane," Jake said. "She's not weak. She's smart enough to know that killing your siblings is wrong. That takes more courage than just following orders." Razor moved forward, each step deliberate and menacing. The crowd scrambled back, but Jake held his ground even though every instinct screamed at him to run. "Where is she, mammal?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can't reach her." "Then I will tear this station apart until I find her." "No, you won't," a new voice interjected. Dr. Lisa Chen stepped forward from the crowd. She was a trained specialist, someone Jake had only talked to a few times. Galactic Concordance law allows for asylum claims. If the hatchling is requesting refugee status, she is dragon. Dragon law applies, Razor snarled. She's on a concordance station. Concordance law applies first, another voice added. Jake turned to see Kyle Rodriguez, one of the Corvin engineers. I've read the treaties. Species can't just execute their own citizens on neutral territory without due process. More voices joined in. A Zentari merchant. A human doctor. A Treen administrator. People Jake had never even spoken to, standing up and citing regulations, laws, precedents. It wasn't everyone, most of the crowd still looked terrified, but it was enough to make Razor pause. Director Hayes looked overwhelmed. This is highly irregular. We need to convene the station council. Convene your council, Razor interrupted. We will wait. One rotation. Then we take what is ours, with or without your permission. He turned his burning gaze back to Jake. And you, little mammal. You should pray your council is wise. Because if they are not, I will personally ensure you understand the price of defying dragon law. The 5 dragons departed, their wings creating wind strong enough to knock smaller beings off their feet. The moment they were gone, the concourse exploded into chaos. Arguments erupted. Security tried to restore order. Director Hayes started barking orders into her comm unit. Jake stood frozen, realizing what he'd just done. He'd painted a target on his back. On Ember's back. On anyone who tried to help them. A hand gripped his shoulder. Dr. Chen looked at him seriously. That was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Jake admitted. I meant what I said. About asylum law. But Jake, you need to understand something. Dragons have enormous political power. They control key trade routes. They have military strength most species can't match. The council might side with them just to avoid conflict. Then what do I do? You tell the truth, Kyle Rodriguez said, joining them. At the council hearing. You explain why you helped her. You make them understand. I'm a janitor, Jake said helplessly. Nobody listens to janitors. I'm nobody important. You were important enough to save a life, Dr. Chen said quietly. That makes you more important than you think. Jake made his way back to his quarters, somehow avoiding security. Ember was pacing frantically, her scales bristling. I heard the announcement, she said. I felt Razor. His presence. His anger. Jake Morrison, you must let me go. If I surrender. You're not surrendering. We're fighting this. How? You cannot fight dragons. Nobody can. We fight with words. With laws. With the truth. Jake sat down heavily on his bed. There's going to be a council hearing. Tomorrow. I'm going to testify. They will rule against you. Against us. Dragon power is too great. Maybe. Probably. But I have to try. Ember settled beside him, her warmth comforting despite everything. Why, Jake Morrison? Why do you risk everything? You could give me to them. Save yourself. Live safe life. Jake thought about his childhood. About the social worker who'd fought to keep him out of a bad foster home. About the teacher who'd tutored him for free when he was failing. About the Johnson family who'd taken in a broken, angry kid and showed him what family could be. Because someone did the same for me once, he said simply. When I was the one who needed help. And because it's the right thing to do, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I do not deserve this, Ember whispered. Yeah, you do. Everyone deserves someone who'll stand up for them. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, mentally preparing for the hearing. What would he say? How could he possibly convince the council that one dragon's life mattered more than political stability? Beside him, Ember's breathing was steady and deep. Trusting. She believed he could do this, even when he didn't believe in himself. He couldn't let her down. The next morning, as they prepared to face the council, Jake made a decision. Win or lose, he wasn't going to let Ember face this alone. Whatever happened, they'd face it together. Just like friends do. The council chamber was packed beyond capacity. Every seat filled, people standing in the aisles, more watching from monitors throughout the station. Jake had never seen so many beings in one place, all silent, all waiting. The council sat behind a curved table on a raised platform. 7 members representing the major political blocs of the concordance. Director Hayes presided over them, looking like she hadn't slept in days. To the right stood the 5 dragons, Razor at the center, radiating menace. To the left stood Jake, alone and feeling very small. Ember was locked in a holding cell for her own protection. Jake had argued against it, but security insisted. At least she was safe for now. Hayes banged a gavel. This emergency session will come to order. We are here to adjudicate the matter of Asylum Claim Reference Code 774 Alpha. The individual known as Ember, a dragon hatchling, versus the sovereign claim of the dragon delegation. Razor stepped forward without waiting to be called. There is nothing to adjudicate. The defective is ours by blood, by law, by right. She violated sacred tradition by fleeing combat. She must face consequences. Give her to us and this ends peacefully. Or what? Jake couldn't help himself. The words just came out. Razor's head swiveled toward him. Or we take her by force. And anyone who stands in our way learns what dragon fire feels like. The chamber erupted in nervous chatter. Hayes banged her gavel again. That was a threat against Concordance citizens. I'll remind you that violence on this station is sometimes necessary, Razor interrupted. Your laws mean nothing to us. Give us the defective or face the consequences of harboring our property. Property. The word made Jake's blood boil. Hayes looked uncomfortable but continued. Mr. Morrison. You've claimed asylum protection for the hatchling. On what grounds? Jake's mouth went dry. He'd rehearsed this 100 times in his head, but standing here with hundreds of eyes on him, his mind went blank. He forced himself to breathe. She asked for help, he started. She was starving, scared, and running for her life. What was I supposed to do? Let her die? Yes, Razor said simply. The weak should die. This is natural law. Natural law. Jake turned to face the dragon directly. There's nothing natural about making kids fight to the death. That's not survival of the fittest. That's just cruelty with a fancy name. You know nothing of our ways, mammal. I know enough. I know that Ember is smart, brave, and capable of things your culture never let her explore because you were too busy trying to kill her. One of the council members, a Zentarii named Vex, spoke up. Mr. Morrison, with respect, many species practice selective breeding or survival-based selection. The dragon's methods may seem harsh, but they've produced one of the galaxy's most formidable species. Formidable at what? Jake challenged. Fighting? Okay, sure. But what else? When's the last time dragons contributed to science? To medicine? To art or culture? You know how many dragons are enrolled in Concordance universities? 0. You know how many serve in medical fields? 0. They're so busy killing each other that they never do anything else. This clearly struck a nerve. Even some of the council members looked thoughtful. Razor, however, looked furious. You dare insult dragon culture? I'm not insulting it. I'm questioning whether it's actually making you stronger or just making you alone. Because from where I'm standing, you've got power but no allies. Strength but no purpose. Fear but no respect. We do not need respect from lesser species. Maybe that's your problem, Jake said quietly. Maybe if you stopped seeing everyone as either strong or weak, predator or prey, you'd realize you're missing out on something important. And what is that, little mammal? Connection. Community. Someone having your back not because they are scared of you, but because they actually care about you. Razor laughed, harsh and mocking. Caring is weakness. It makes you vulnerable. It also makes you strong in ways you can't understand. Jake gestured to the crowd. Look around. I'm one guy. A janitor. Nobody special. But when you threatened Ember, people I barely know stood up. Dr. Chen cited asylum law. Kyle Rodriguez pulled treaty regulations. A dozen others spoke up. Why? Because humans don't just protect our own. We protect anyone who needs it. Foolish sentiment. Is it? Because human civilization has been around for thousands of years. We've survived wars, plagues, famines, everything. You know how? By taking care of each other. The strong protecting the weak. The healthy helping the sick. That's not weakness. That's why we're everywhere in this galaxy now. The chamber had gone quiet. People were listening, really listening. Hayes leaned forward. Mr. Morrison, the council needs to know. If we grant asylum, what happens to the hatchling? Where would she go? She stays with me, Jake said firmly. I'll take responsibility for her. I'll make sure she's fed, housed, educated. Whatever she needs. You cannot afford to care for a dragon, Vex pointed out. Your salary. Then I'll work extra shifts. I'll figure it out. That's what you do for family. She is not your family, Razor snarled. She is dragon. She's both. She's dragon by birth and she's family by choice. And that choice matters more. Razor had apparently heard enough. He spread his wings, making himself look even more massive. I invoke ancient right. Trial by combat. Me against this mammal. If he wins, the defective goes free. If I win, she dies and so does he. The chamber exploded into chaos. Hayes banged her gavel repeatedly. That's not how we resolve disputes in the Concordance. It is how dragons resolve disputes. Always has been. Always will be. The mammal speaks of strength? Let him prove it. Jake's heart stopped. Fight a dragon? He'd be dead in seconds. But then he thought about Ember, locked in that cell, waiting to hear if she'd live or die. He thought about every kid who'd ever been thrown away by their own family. Every person who'd been called weak or defective or not good enough. I accept, Jake heard himself say. The chamber went silent. Hayes looked horrified. Mr. Morrison, you can't be serious. He'll kill you. Probably, Jake agreed. His hands were shaking but his voice stayed steady. But at least I'll die knowing I tried. That's more than some people can say. Dr. Chen pushed through the crowd. There has to be another way. There isn't, Jake said. Not one that ends with Ember safe. This is the only option. Razor's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Finally. A mammal with spine. It will break easily, but at least you have one. We fight in 1 hour. The main cargo bay. No weapons. No assistance. Dragon law. Fine, Jake said, trying not to throw up. 1 hour. The next 60 minutes passed in a blur. Jake tried to prepare, tried to think of a strategy, but what strategy could possibly work against a creature that could literally breathe fire? Kyle Rodriguez pulled him aside and gave him advice about dragon physiology, weak points, behavioral patterns. It all sounded theoretical and useless. Dr. Chen offered to smuggle him off the station. Nobody would blame you for running. I would, Jake said. I'd blame me. And I'd have to live with that. When the hour was up, Jake walked into the cargo bay alone. The space had been cleared and surrounded by viewing platforms. Thousands of spectators crowded to watch. Some looked excited. Most looked horrified. A few looked away, unable to watch what was about to happen. Razor entered from the opposite side. In the large open space, he looked even more massive. 12 feet of muscle, scale, and deadly intent. Jake stood in his maintenance jumpsuit with a fire extinguisher, a wrench, and determination that felt increasingly stupid. Hayes's voice came over the speakers. This is highly irregular and I'm officially protesting this barbaric display. But under Dragon Treaty law, I cannot stop it. Combat begins, now. Razor charged immediately. Jake barely dodged, rolling to the side as claws gouged the deck plating where he'd been standing. He came up running, putting a cargo container between himself and the dragon. Running? Razor taunted. How very mammal of you. Jake didn't waste breath responding. He was already calculating angles, distances, options. The cargo bay had environmental controls, loading equipment, venting systems. It wasn't much, but it was something. Razor smashed through the cargo container like it was cardboard. Jake sprayed the fire extinguisher in his face, the foam temporarily blinding him. The dragon roared, swiping wildly. Jake ducked under the talons and jammed his wrench into an exposed joint in Razor's front leg. The dragon bellowed in pain and fury. His tail whipped around, catching Jake in the ribs. Jake flew backward, hitting a wall hard enough to see stars. Pain exploded through his chest. Definitely broken ribs. He forced himself to stand, gasping for air. Still standing? Razor sounded almost impressed. Tougher than expected. But tough enough. The dragon's jaws opened. Jake saw the glow building in his throat. Fire was coming. In that moment, Jake realized something. He couldn't win this fight. Not with strength. Not with weapons. But maybe that wasn't the point. The fire never came. Ember crashed through the cargo bay doors, her copper scales blazing in the harsh lights. She was smaller than the other dragons, still growing, but her wings were spread wide and her eyes burned with something Jake had never seen before. Rage mixed with determination. Stop, she roared, her voice echoing through the massive space. Razor wheeled around, confused. The defective escapes her cage? Good. Saves me the trouble of hunting you down later. You will not touch him, Ember snarled, placing herself between Jake and her clutch brother. I challenge you, Razor. Not the human. Me. The cargo bay went absolutely silent. Even the crowd on the viewing platforms seemed to hold their breath. Razor laughed, the sound cruel and sharp. You? Challenge me? You fled from combat. You proved your weakness. You have no right to challenge anyone. I fled because I thought your way was the only way, Ember said, her voice steady now. I thought I had to be like you or die trying. But I was wrong. I learned something in these weeks with Jake Morrison. I learned there are different kinds of strength. Sentiment, Razor spat. Mammal poison filling your head. Truth, Ember corrected. You say the weak must die. But who decides what weak means? You? Dragon tradition? I have learned things you cannot even imagine. I speak 3 languages now. I understand mathematics, physics, medicine. I know what compassion means. What loyalty means. What sacrifice means. Words, Razor growled. Dragon strength is measured in claw and fire. Then you've already lost, Ember said quietly. Because you measure only one thing and call it everything. Jake Morrison has shown me that the universe is bigger than fighting. Purpose is bigger than dominance. Life is bigger than survival. Jake tried to stand, wincing at the pain in his ribs. Ember, don't. Just run. Get out of here. She glanced back at him, and Jake saw tears in those golden eyes. Dragons could cry. He'd never known that. I cannot run anymore, Jake Morrison. You did not run when you could have. You stood for me when no one else would. You gave me shelter, food, protection. You gave me the most valuable thing anyone has ever given me. What's that? A choice, Ember said simply. The choice to be something different than what I was born to be. And I choose this. I choose to stand with you. I choose to fight for something that matters. Razor's patience ran out. He lunged at Ember with a roar that shook the cargo bay walls. The 2 dragons collided in a clash of scales and fury. They were a blur of copper and black, claws raking, tails whipping, jaws snapping. Ember was smaller, younger, less experienced. She should have been crushed immediately. But she fought with something Razor didn't have. She fought with purpose beyond just winning. Every move protected Jake. Every dodge positioned herself between him and her clutch brother. Jake watched helplessly, still struggling to breathe through broken ribs. Dr. Chen and Kyle Rodriguez had appeared at the cargo bay entrance, but security held them back. This was dragon law now. No one could interfere. The fight was brutal. Ember took hit after hit, her scales cracking, blood seeping through. But she didn't back down. Didn't run. Didn't submit. Why? Razor demanded, pinning her against a wall. Why do you fight for this mammal? He is nothing. We are dragons. We are superior. He is everything, Ember gasped. He is what we could be if we chose differently. If we protected instead of destroyed. If we built instead of conquered. If we loved instead of dominated. Love, Razor's voice dripped with disgust. The ultimate weakness. The ultimate strength, Ember corrected. She twisted free, using a move no dragon would expect because it relied on flexibility over power. You cannot understand it because you have never felt it. You were never shown kindness, so you cannot give it. You were never protected, so you cannot protect. You were raised in violence, so violence is all you know. For just a moment, something flickered in Razor's eyes. Something that might have been pain or confusion or recognition. I pity you, Ember said softly. You are strong and powerful and completely alone. You will live your entire life surrounded by enemies, even among your own kind. You will die having never known what it feels like to be cared for. I need no one, Razor snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Everyone needs someone, Ember replied. Even dragons. Especially dragons. Our way is wrong, Razor. It has always been wrong. We convince ourselves that isolation is strength, but it is just fear wearing a crown. The cargo bay had gone completely silent again. The other 4 dragons in the delegation watched with expressions Jake couldn't read. The crowd on the viewing platforms leaned forward. Jake finally managed to stand fully, one hand pressed against his ribs. She's right, he called out, his voice rough but carrying. Your whole culture is built on fear. Fear of being weak. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of caring about someone because they might be taken away. But that fear makes you prisoners. Silence, mammal, Razor snapped, but he didn't attack. Didn't move. Something in him had frozen. You talk about strength, Jake continued, limping forward despite Dr. Chen's shouted warnings. But you know what takes real strength? Admitting you're scared. Asking for help when you need it. Protecting someone weaker than you instead of crushing them. That's the stuff that keeps you up at night, isn't it? Wondering if there might be another way? There is no other way, Razor said, but his voice was barely a whisper now. There is, Ember said. I am proof. I chose differently. I fled combat not because I was weak, but because I was strong enough to question tradition. Strong enough to want something better. Strong enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, life should be more than endless fighting. One of the other dragons in the delegation stepped forward. The silver-scaled one who'd laughed earlier. But she wasn't laughing now. What would you have us do? She asked, and her voice carried genuine curiosity. Return to our clutch ships and tell our elders that everything we believe is wrong? They would kill us for such words. Then don't go back, Jake said. Stay here. Learn what Ember learned. There's a whole galaxy full of species who figured out how to be strong without being cruel. Study them. Talk to them. Figure out who you want to be instead of just accepting who you were told to be. Razor's whole body was trembling now. If I return without the defective, I will be branded failure. Weak. They will come for me next. So don't return, Ember said gently. Stay. Be different with me. We can build something new. Something better. The tension in the cargo bay was unbearable. Jake watched Razor's face, seeing decades of conditioning war with something new. Something that might have been hope. Finally, Razor's wings folded. His head lowered. Not submission exactly, but something close to surrender. I yield, he said quietly. I cannot kill her. Not after hearing. He couldn't finish the sentence. The cargo bay erupted. Some spectators cheered. Others argued. The council members looked stunned. Director Hayes grabbed her gavel but seemed unsure what to rule. Jake limped over to Ember, who collapsed as soon as the adrenaline faded. Her injuries were severe. We need medical now. Jake shouted. Dr. Chen was already running with a medical team. They swarmed Ember, scanning, injecting, stabilizing. Jake knelt beside her, taking her clawed hand in his. You didn't have to do that, he said. Yes, I did, Ember whispered. You taught me that protecting others is worth any cost. I learned from the best teacher. I'm just a janitor. You are the human who changed everything. 3 months later, Gateway Station looked different. The refuge program had been established in a newly constructed wing. Ember had recovered fully and now served as its director, working alongside Jake who'd been promoted but still insisted on cleaning when stressed. The program housed 17 young beings from 12 different species, all fleeing violent traditions. Razor and 2 of his clutch siblings had stayed, working as security and mentors. The transformation in Razor was remarkable. He was learning to channel his strength toward protection instead of destruction. Word spread across the galaxy. Some species were outraged. Others were curious. But quietly, slowly, young beings began arriving. Asking for help. Asking for a different way. Jake stood in his office, which still felt too big and fancy, watching Ember teach a class on conflict resolution to a mixed group of young aliens. She was magnificent now, full-grown and powerful, but she used that power to shelter rather than dominate. Kyle Rodriguez knocked and entered. You've got another request. 3 Corvan youth asking for asylum. Their elders want them to undergo some kind of painful ritual scarring. They are scared. Tell them yes, Jake said immediately. We'll find room. Jake, we're already over capacity. The council is getting nervous about how many resources we're using. Then we'll find more resources. We'll expand. We'll do whatever it takes. Kyle smiled. You know, when you first told me about finding that dragon hatchling, I thought you were crazy. I was crazy. Still am probably. Yeah, but the good kind of crazy. The kind that changes things. That night, Jake walked through the refuge wing during quiet hours. Young beings slept peacefully in beds, some for the first time in their lives without fear of violence. The strong protected the weak here. The healthy helped the sick. Everyone looked out for everyone else. It was the most human thing Jake had ever seen, and more than half the residents weren't even human. Ember found him standing in the common area, lost in thought. You are troubled, Jake Morrison? Not troubled. Just thinking. About how one small decision can change everything. If I'd walked past you that night, if I'd called security like I was supposed to, none of this exists. But you did not walk past. You chose compassion. You chose to help. That choice created ripples that spread across the galaxy. Sounds dramatic when you put it that way. Ember's laugh was warm, nothing like Razor's cruel mockery from months ago. It is dramatic. You saved one life and that life saved others and those lives will save more. This is the way of compassion. It multiplies. It spreads. Like dragon fire, but warm instead of destructive. Jake looked at his friend, this impossible being who'd stumbled into his life and changed everything. You think it'll last? Think we actually changed anything real? I think, Ember said carefully, that we planted seeds. Some will grow. Some will not. But enough will take root that the galaxy will never quite be the same. Species across the stars are watching. Young ones are questioning traditions. Elders are afraid of change. That fear means we have succeeded. Through the viewport, stars turned slowly. Somewhere out there, on 1,000 worlds, young beings looked up at those same stars and wondered if maybe there was a place for them. A place where being different didn't mean being dead. Where asking for help wasn't weakness. Where someone would stand up for them even when it cost everything. Jake Morrison, janitor turned refuge director, smiled. He'd started with one dragon hatchling and a blanket nest in his quarters. Now he had a family that spanned the stars. And somewhere, on a clutch ship in deep space, a dragon hatchling heard whispers of Ember's choice and began to wonder. Began to question. Began to hope. The revolution had begun with 2 words. Please help. And a human who'd said yes.